I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap up for Friday, June 19th, 2015. And they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. And here is the first picture. I know this is an offbeat lead, but I think this is a huge, disastrous story that is completely underreported. You ready for it? This is a drought map. It's the most current drought map. You can see it on the U.S. Drought Monitor. And let's just go ahead and zoom in here, and let's take a look at this right here. California. It's ground zero. 100% of California is in some sort of drought. Of course, the many states in the West, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, Oregon, Idaho, all the way up the coast there, even Washington State, all in some sort of pretty severe drought. Not just mild drought. And of course, the dark red is the most extreme. This is the worst drought ever in California, ever in recorded history. Are you getting that? Are you understanding that this is a state with a $2.2 trillion GDP? The country has a 14 or $15 trillion GDP. This is 2.2 trillion of that. Just agriculture alone is $46 billion. Huge food growing region. This is a disaster for the United States. This is a disaster for the world. It could push California into total insolvency. People are already storing water in their garage in 500 gallons at a time. They've cut off the water at least in one wealthy city in California. There is no end in sight. There is no solution in sight. I'm telling you, folks. Will Rogers says, or was it Mark Twain said, history, doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Dust Bowl days. This is the Dust Bowl days on steroids and acid. I mean, this is going to be ghoulish, horrible. It's unbelievable. I mean, the rest of the country is probably saying, "Wow, drought? What drought?" But out in California, it is severe. And remember, back in March, NASA came out and said that there was a year's worth of water left in March. 1 year's worth of water left in California, a state with 38 million people. There's a little less than 40 million people. Just California. It's not like they can go across the border to Nevada. They have a year's worth of water left, so we are T-minus 9 months in counting. Unless there's a serious, pickup in rainfall, which they say they don't think is going to happen, or they find some serious solutions to bring more water in, which I don't know where they can get in. Desalinization, I brought that up before, but lots of folks say it's an ecological disaster, desalinization, but I don't know. Maybe they might have to find out a way to desalinize water in the Pacific Ocean cleaner. I don't know. Necessity is a mother invention, but things are not looking good in the state of California. And why this isn't front page news, I do not know. The Greek debt crisis got kicked into high gear, and they are apparently careening towards a bona fide default. Not the extend and pretend default that we already have. I think from the moment they started loaning, the EU started loaning Greece money to pay its bills when they had only 170 billion euro in debt. Now it's 330 billion. They had already defaulted. This week, Greek politicians, and this is why I say they kicked it into high gear. Greek politicians came out and said the debt owed to the EU is, quote, illegitimate and illegal, also odious. That means they cannot and will not pay that debt back. We're finally going to get to the realization they're not going to pay the debt back, and Greek depositors are feeling that. There has been reportedly a run on Greek banks. Also, people are opining that the Greek banks may not open on Monday. Serious stuff, folks. And it's not, if it was just Greece and all the other countries in the European Union were flush and they weren't insolvent and they had plenty of they had their financial house in order. They weren't spending too much money. They had some emergency funds. No. There are many countries in the European Union are insolvent. And they're worried about contagion, worried about this spreading. They're worried about this spreading in the banks. They're worried about all the derivatives attached to this debt. The Bank of International Settlement said there's a quadrillion, which to me is, my brain explodes. 1,000 trillion in debt bets, in leverage derivatives. and they took their capital, and then on top of that, they leveraged it up with 30, 40, 50 times. If you have $2 and you loan out, that $2, $100, you don't need a big loss to wipe out your capital. Just $2 of $100 that you loaned out wipes out your capital. Your bank's insolvent. Now, it gets interesting because Greece has reportedly signed a deal with the Russians, to have a gas pipeline to bypass the Ukraine, where allegedly they were stealing gas from the Russians, natural gas, and they're going to bypass Ukraine. They're going to go across northern Greece and out into the Adriatic Sea and into eastern Italy. They're just going to bypass, Ukraine altogether. And keep in mind, Greece is a NATO country. So is somebody going to blink? Bernie Sanders, senator from, I believe, Vermont, said that he thought that the Federal Reserve should bail them out. Really? Or is the EU going to give up that final little bit of debt relief already approved, $7.2 trillion, to extend and pretend this a little farther, kick the can right up to the edge of the cliff before they finally do officially default? Or have they already defaulted? I don't know, but this is going to end sooner than later. It will end, and it's going to end ugly. Be prepared. And it's going to affect people in Europe, and then it'll affect people here in the U.S. It will affect, because everything is interconnected in the global financial system. The Federal Reserve will not be raising rates. This is according to the Federal Reserve. They also reduced their growth forecast. So growth is at least slowing down. Of course, if you look at the first quarter of the GDP in the U.S., it's negative 0.7%. Some people say it was worse than that. It was 2 or 3 or 4%. Way worse than that. That's the best they can make it look, 0.7% negative growth in the first quarter. And now the Fed is not going to raise rates. And you had Christine Lagarde out publicly scolding the Federal Reserve. They could have just called up Janet Yellen on the phone, publicly scolding the Federal Reserve, telling not to raise rates. But what do we have yesterday in the USA Today? But it just said they're not going to raise rates. And what do they have? Hey, Fed on track to raise rates in the fall. What? Excuse me? What? My good friend Gregory Mannarino called me and says, no, that they're not going to raise rates because the CPI, the inflation number, the core inflation number just came in, and it came in at 0.1%. The inflation, according to the Federal Reserve, and we all know it's much higher than that, but all they care about, according to Mannarino, is the core inflation. I think he's right about that. 0.1%. Mannarino says, quote, they cannot and will not raise interest rates. They can't. If they do it, they'll implode the economy. I mean, if you got 0.1%, you don't have any robust economy. They can't do it. And yet we have, and then we have this. I mean, the financial press is schizophrenic at best. And here's this headline. This is in the same newspaper. Bonds, haven is shaky at best. Now, they're talking about raising interest rates, and the Fed can lose control of interest rates. Bond vigilantes can come in, and they can lose control. Part of that that quadrillion in derivatives is to suppress interest rates. Wow, what could go wrong with that much leverage and debt and shady things going on? Bonds, haven status gets shaky. That's because, interest rates are spiking. The 10-year went from back in February something like 1.67%, and now it's 2.3 or something percent. Big move. And again, that, those bonds are assets, and as the rates go up, the asset depreciates, the bond depreciates, and depreciates the asset base. And, then we have another, this is in my local paper, but it's an AP story. Economists don't fear rising rates. Really? Just tell that to Christine Lagarde in the bond market. She's saying, no, don't raise rates. Don't raise rates. She was a head of a 2,700 lawyer law firm that did nothing but swaps. She knows all about derivatives and all about the the debt bets and the super unbelievable, unprecedented, never recorded the type of leverage in the history of the financial system. Economists don't fear rise in rates. What, oh, really? Tell that to the bond traders and Christine Lagarde. I mean that's schizophrenic. But they're not going to raise rates, according to Mannarino at traderschoice.net, who's a regular guest on usawatchdog.com. Next up, I want to talk about the trade deal that we have going on. It is the hold on a minute, let me get it right here. The GOP looks like they've got a trade deal. It looks like they are going to bypass, even though they were reporting this week that the GOP was going to work on a trade bill, and it's called a Trade Promotion Authority, TPA. There's so many different letters. It's a TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and other different, lettered up, parts of the trade deal. Here we have Paul Ryan, who says, the Dems sabotage the trade deal, but nowhere in the mainstream press, on any of these stories and all the stories I read, they don't hit up the real problem with all this, and that is that it's secret. That the public cannot read this like other bills. If senators have to go into a room by themselves and read hundreds of pages, they have a time limit, they can't take a picture, they don't get a copy, did I tell you it's secret and the public doesn't get to know what they're doing? Paul Ryan, congressman who's pushing this through, Republican who should be ashamed of himself, might I add. Congressman Paul said, the TPA is a process and not an agreement. Of course, that is the trade, authority. He says it's a process, the TPA. Of course, he leaves out the fact that that process is secret and nobody gets to read it, the Trade Promotion Authority. He goes on to say that the TPA is more accountable and more transparent. Yeah, that's right, more transparent. That's why it's secret. And the Congress people have to go into a room and not take a picture and read this stuff. I heard one congressman say, I'd like to have somebody come in, some of my staff and some experts come in and tell me what this means. I'd like it if they just made copies and gave it to the congressman and allowed the public to see what they were doing. But there's an old saying, and it said, evil is done in the dark. Good is done in the light. And this is being done in the dark. Oh, they say it's national security, but of course, once it gets voted on, according to Paul Ryan, it gets declassified. Oh, that's right, declassified. But until we vote on it, you can't know what it is. National security. Evil done in the dark, good done in the light. This is being done in the dark. To me, it's pure evil. And I just wonder who these people are really working for. A couple other little notes that I wanted to bring up here. And this is the ongoing ISIS operation over in Iraq and Syria. And to me, listen, they're not serious about it. And Obama last week said that he was going to send another 450 troops. I think we have 3,500 over there to take on an army of, 40,000? I don't know. And here they're talking about this in Congress, and this is the new Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter. The quote is, too few trainees. A House panel is told, they can't train enough. There are not enough people that want to go fight ISIS. They got like 7,000. They need 24,000. The guy in the middle here, Martin Dempsey, Joint Chiefs of Staff, he said you needed 80,000. This guy, 80,000. It's not focusing for me for some reason, but anyway, you get the drift. 80,000 competent troops to take out ISIS. He said that back the end of last year or the beginning of this year. You need 80,000 competent, quote, competent troops. They got 7,000. Now, does that mean that the whole plan is going to implode? Because the Obama administration, not serious. They're not flying enough sorties. If they don't want to put boots on the ground, fine. They're not flying enough sorties. They're not flying enough missions. And why do they get to pump oil and sell it on the black market? I mean, aren't oil pumps pretty big? Can't we see them from space, from satellites? Can't we send drones over there? Why are any of those pumps still pumping? Why? If they were serious, they'd cut off their money and they'd bomb them day and night. If they were serious. They're not serious. They are not serious. And I wonder if this headline means that, maybe at some point we're going to need to send some more of our people, maybe, 50,000 over there to take on ISIS. I don't know. They're not serious. They've lost all these vehicles. In one shot, they lost 2,300 Humvees. There's a cartoon out. It sees a general walking up to the president in the cartoon caricature of the president. He says, Mr. President, we lost 2,300 Humvees. And the cartoon character of the president's answer was, void all the warranties. I mean, They're not serious. If they were serious, they would knock out their money. And their money is coming from oil on the black market, but they're not doing that. And people in the press corps, in the White House press corps, couldn't they say, why don't we bomb their oil? Why don't we cut off their money? Excuse me. Why don't we cut them off? Why do we allow that to happen? If we were serious, wouldn't we do that? They're not serious. Not at all. I also want to bring up this. I want to tell you, I used to be a Catholic. I am no longer a Catholic. The pedophile priest thing when I was living in New York pretty much made me not be a Catholic. However, I am still a Christian. Now, I'm not Catholic because Catholics are bad. They're not. They're good people. Catholic doctrine is good. They believe in Christ. They believe in he died on the cross and he came back and returned again. Catholic doctrine, fine. No problem. I have no problem with Catholics. Lots of good Catholics. I got friends of mine who are Catholics. Here's who I got a problem with, him and the last Pope. Because, this Pope Francis, he's saying that, we ought to have, he released a big report about, well, the most important thing is climate change. This is him and Obama, the same thing. Climate change. We need to stop climate change. And I think the Pope ought to stick to, something in his wheelhouse, not climate change. There's plenty of folks out there, and what you haven't heard is that since 1998, and this is a known fact, that the global warming has paused. Why? Well, because of less sun flares hitting the Earth. And there are a lot of top-notch scientists say that we're really heading into a mini ice age, a cooling period for the Earth. Even though, the Pope is saying, oh, this is, poor countries. Well, poor countries are pumping out all kinds of carbon emissions, and the U.S. says carbon emissions have pretty much, leveled off, mainly because of the fracking and the natural gas. The poor countries that he says are being damaged are the people doing the damage. And what this is really, in my humble opinion, it just smacks of New World Order control. Oh, we got to save the Earth, so we have to control everybody on the planet. We have to save the Earth. I don't buy it, and I think the Pope ought to stick to saving souls. And maybe he should revisit his comment about how atheists can make it to heaven if they just do good deeds. Of course, that's not what it says in the Bible, and that's not what it says in the Catholic doctrine. Finally, this idiot that shot 9 people in South Carolina, I don't know who's a bigger idiot, him or the father that gave him a handgun, I think a .45 caliber handgun. He's allegedly a drug addict. He may be on psychotropic drugs. He is at the very least, deranged and hateful, and it's horrible. And people ask me why I'm for the death penalty. And I say because some things, some crimes you commit, you should die for. And killing 9 unarmed people at a church Bible study on a Wednesday night, you should die for. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you for supporting USA Watchdog with your comments and your donations. That helps us. Here's the best part, folks. Fear not. Prepare yourself mentally, physically, and above all, spiritually. Fear not.